Hello, welcome to Conversations here, our conversation with Americans for Prosperity and Representative Kat Cammack from the 3rd District in Florida. Really grateful to have you on. Obviously, it's been quite a week with elections just recently, and excited to be able to have a conversation with you about sort of what we expect to see coming forward. So I'll introduce myself to the rest of the audience. I'm Casey Mattox. I'm Vice President for Legal and Judicial Strategy at Americans for Prosperity, and just thrilled to be able to have you on and share with our grassroots today.
Hey, so great to be with you. Thank you.
Well, as we move into this next session of Congress, obviously you're going to be returning and representing the people of the 3rd District in Florida, and just curious as to there you go.
All right, I gotta do the Go Gators.
You must, right? As an Alabama fan, it's been a rough year for me. So, but as you move into this next session, what are the biggest challenges that you think we're facing as a country, and what are the big issues that you're looking to try to engage on right out of the gate? So I'm asking you the very big question right up top. What's on your mind?
So, I don't think there's enough time in the day for us to go over all of the challenges that we're facing. If I had to pick one, I think the spending is hugely, hugely important. That really doesn't get talked about enough. It's kind of the giant elephant in the room that everyone knows is there and keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but people choose to fight over little things in the corner that are significant, yes, but in terms of the impact that the spending is going to have on every single American, and quite literally the world, because the world requires a very strong, robust America. We don't really understand, I think, and I'm saying this broadly, the impact that dollars in that is going to what it's going to do to my generation, to the Gen Zs that come right after me. What is that going to do to my kids, my grandkids? There are absolutely consequences for $10 trillion that has been spent in the last 23 months under this administration. And we're seeing the immediate impacts, which of course are historic inflation. We're seeing some of the kinks in the supply chain that have really struggled. But I think that largely people collectively in the country are concerned, and this is twofold, about the size of government and the scope of government. And on the size part, that's the spending function, right? It continues to grow. We create all these programs that are designed really, in my opinion, to keep people dependent on government programs. And that in turn turns to the scope, which is the everyday involvement of government in our lives, from everything from a mandate to the regulatory environment. And these are the things that I am truly concerned about. My biggest hope in the 118th Congress is that the House and Senate will pass the REINS Act. That's our bill. And it's designed to rein in government, because what we've seen is that the executive branch takes a very aggressive approach to regulating industries to achieve political aims. And we've seen that in the energy industry. We've seen that in agriculture. We see that in manufacturing, mining, other industries that are deemed politically toxic. Not to put a play on words there, but that's really not the function of the executive branch. So returning the regulatory capability to Congress for an up or down vote, because quite frankly, you can fire your congressman. You can't fire a bureaucrat. It's virtually impossible. That is going to be a huge focus of mine. So broadly, when I think about the challenges that we're facing, it's the size of government, it's the scope of government, it's the spending in government. That is something that we have to tackle right away. And that has national security implications. Of course, we can talk very largely about the open border and crime that has gripped this nation, the lack of foreign policy that has come in the last few years. But the economics of it all really are the root of the source of both our success and our troubles. And so I think focusing on economic issues is going to be paramount, but we have to have a very serious adult conversation about the spending that is going on in our country. And so those are the issues that I'll be focused on. And of course, accountability is a huge part of that.
Right. Well, that's great. You know, I think a lot more Americans have become very aware the last couple of years of the problem of creeping government involvement in our daily lives in ways that we would have never really thought of as being a possibility. And I think we've all sort of seen the possibility that there's really no place that government doesn't want to be in our lives if we give them that opportunity. And so I do think that's really important. So obviously we have a shift in makeup in the House, and one of the things that you have been leading on is veterans healthcare issues. And I'm curious what you think the change in leadership and change in the makeup of the House might mean for the potential to be able to see some progress on veterans healthcare legislation.
I'm hopeful and really quite confident that looking ahead, we're going to be able to better deliver the end of the bargain that we in government have with our veterans and service members around the country by providing effective care, efficient care, higher quality care, without all of the extraneous things that have been going on here in the last 23 months. A great example is some of the healthcare bills for the VA and the veterans community that have come up here recently. They have, much to the chagrin of my colleagues, because I read the bills, I've noticed where they will tuck in diversity and inclusion training and certain boxes that need to be checked that are rooted more in a social cultural shift rather than actual healthcare. And that really does take away from the primary mission and scope of the VA, which is to take care of our veterans and their families. And so I think you're going to see a more direct approach to it. I want to see wait times come down. I want to see a real focus and emphasis on mental health counseling for those that have experienced military sexual trauma and have PTSD. I want to see a more collaborative effort between the VA and the private sector. We have so many veterans that live in rural America that are pretty far away from a clinic or a hospital system. And so taking advantage of ways that we can do telehealth and getting resources to them where they're at. We should be extending every opportunity and courtesy to our veterans to make sure that they're getting the healthcare, the answers, and everything that they need. I think every time that there's a roadblock thrown up, it just contributes to the narrative that's out there that the VA is continuing to grow into this giant bureaucracy that is more focused on building itself rather than serving the veterans. So I'm hopeful that we can strip a lot of that extraneous material out of the legislation, focus on what needs to be done, and then hold people accountable. This is a huge issue. When you have a veteran who comes to you as a member of Congress and they say, I've been waiting for an appointment or an appeal for years and I need answers. As a member of Congress, I can pull that file and say, hey, they're telling me that you didn't check a box or you didn't sign page 5 or whatever it may be. But then the system, now this is the unofficial system, but it's become common practice, where that file is in the queue, they move it to the very back. So they punish veterans for being proactive. That has to change. So there's some cultural things that we need to check within the VA system. And I come back to the premise that you cannot do enough to honor the contract that we have with our nation's veterans. And I think you're going to see a tremendous outreach effort in correcting a lot of the cultural issues, the bureaucratic red tape issues, and really getting back to the basics and focusing on care.
Well, that's great. I know a lot of people will be very glad to hear that you think that there is a possibility of making some progress there.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we move into with leadership change in the House, I imagine that there's probably going to be some changes in just the way things get done in the House. And curious if you've got thoughts that you can share with folks about how you think that just sort of the process of governing is going to change in DC now with change in leadership in the House.
Honestly, I think that you're going to see a much more open, transparent, and accountable process. What I have experienced as a freshman legislator for the last 2 years has been a very closed process that is rushed, hurried, little or no input from Republicans has been allowed. Virtually no amendments get included into these packages. And that's really frustrating because the American people send us here to get things done. And really good ideas come from everywhere. And so it's been a very closed process. And I think something that's also very frustrating is getting a bill 24 hours before you have to vote on it or less.
Right.
And I know, call me crazy, I actually read the bills. You're expected to cast a vote on behalf of 750,000 people, and you haven't read the legislation. At that point, the only thing you can do is vote no, because I've been on the receiving end of very, very poor legislation as a result of legislation that nobody bothered to read. My family, along with millions of other folks, we lost our home. And so there's a real sense that we need to give people the time to really dig into the legislation. But then more than that, we need to have an open process where people can submit amendments and have a voice and a seat at the table. I think that's really important. And I would love for us to get to single issue bills. I know that is the end game. We have these massive packages that all these things that have no business being married together or put together, they all get in there. But I think we're going to start peeling that back, staying very focused on the issue, because then it should stand on its own merits. I think you're going to see a lot more in that respect of how things will change. But I also think you're going to see a much higher tempo. We're going to be dealing with things like securing the border right out the gate, firing 87,000 IRS agents that we're going to be contracted out to foreigners, by the way, because we couldn't find the workforce here, according to the IRS. Conversation for another day. Lowering gas prices by restarting domestic production of energy here, getting our economy back on track. These are things, it's going to be an incredibly high tempo, fast pace right out the gate. I'm really excited about that because I think for the first time in a long time, we'll be able to prove that Congress can actually get things done.
Right. Well, obviously you've got a lot of AFP grassroots activists on the listening here, watching to us now, and I'm curious, basically where you see the role of grassroots activists like AFP activists in and outside your district, and where they can be effective. If from your position in DC, as you're trying to think about the issues that are going to be coming up and the fights that are going to be coming up in the future, what do you think are both the ways to engage and the real opportunities where basically the voice of people is going to be particularly important?
Oh my gosh. Well, as someone who loves grassroots probably more than your average member of Congress, I'm a grassroots person. Strangely, I like knocking on doors. I know it's weird, but no, I think it's really important because this is a government for the people, by the people. It's we the people. My husband jokes that if I were ever to get a tattoo, it would be "We the People," and it's because I truly believe it. I really do, and it's the government that we deserve, right? It's how much are we putting in? I tell people all the time. In fact, I was speaking to a group of college students last night, and I said, think of your job, right? And what you want to do in your career moving forward. Now take 25% of your job, and that's advocacy. Your job is advocacy because no one is going to do a better job advocating for the things that you need and that you want than you. And so for the grassroots activists that are watching it right now, I would encourage you, stay involved with your member of Congress. That is so critically important. Have a regular, be in their office, go to lunch, have their cell phone numbers. Members who think that they know everything, they're wrong. I think we all know that, right? I subscribe to the theory that you don't know what you don't know. And having activists, particularly ones that are motivated and educated and as part of a group like AFP, which I love AFP. If I had an AFP hat, I'd be wearing it. But it's so critically important because you guys are more in tune with what's going on than your average person. And so having people who know what's going on in the community, but also know the national issues, it becomes a sounding board, becomes a value add to the team. somebody who the member can then turn around and say, hey, I wonder what my local grassroots folks are thinking right now. Like, it's a great way to build that relationship, and you get better policy as a result. I cannot say enough about the grassroots teams and activism and the advocates that go out and do the work. It's truly incredible when you have someone, and I'll just give you an example. There's 12,000 pieces of legislation that are introduced in the Congress. When someone shows up or sends me a text message and says, hey, there's this bill coming up and I just want to flag this for you, you have no idea the importance of that. And why is that important? Because we're in a vortex and somebody needs to stick their hand out and say, you need to pay attention to this. This is really important. And here's some context for us in the district or, the state, whatever it may be.
Right.
That's huge. And if you think that that's going on, it really doesn't happen that often because people think that members have these massive, huge staffs and, we know everything that's going on. It's virtually impossible. So that activism, that engagement cannot be overstated, truly. And for everybody watching, thank you for doing the inconvenient thing of being on the webinar with us today. You could be, doing anything. You could be at work or binging Netflix or whatever it is that you want to be doing. But in order to make our country successful, it's going to take people who are willing to do the inconvenient things. So thank you.
Right. No, absolutely. It's impressive to me that that so many people tune in for these, because I think it really just shows the commitment of our grassroots and the interest in their country and the policies of our country. So it's quite humbling to just think of the people that are joining to be able to listen to this conversation. So I'm really grateful. As so you mentioned earlier, obviously we're going to have a relatively closely divided House, and you're also going to have, and you mentioned that in the past Congress that there was this sort of dynamic where decisions were made, and you were expected to sort of show up and vote. And I'm curious if there are sort of bipartisan opportunities, if there are basically things that you think are coming in this next Congress, there's actually an opportunity to be able to make good policy across across party lines and be able to bring people together on some issues that are affecting Americans. If you've got an example or two of some of those things that where you think there's really an opportunity to be able to build some partnerships across the aisle.
Yeah, I really do. It's funny. I grew up in a Democrat household, and I'm probably the most conservative person, certainly in my family. But across Congress, I'm definitely probably one of the more conservative ones. But I tell people that at the end of the day, as Americans, regardless of what box you check and what party you affiliate with, I think by and large, and I'm speaking very generally here, we all kind of want the same things. Not everything, but I would say 80% of the things. We want to be able to, buy a home and raise a family and have safe neighborhoods and, just like the big things. But how we get to that end point is a whole different matter, right? And I tell people, some people want to fly to get to the final destination. They're the frequent flyers. Then you got people who want to road trip it. Okay, that's a totally different thing. And then you got the weirdos that want to take the Amtrak train. It's just everybody's got their own way. And of course, somebody I'm sure is watching being like, I love Amtrak. It's not an assault. It's not an offense. But it's going to be different how we all arrive at this destination. But if we can agree that there are certain things that we all want, that's the starting point. And one example is the issue of fentanyl and the opioid epidemic that is taking place in every neighborhood in America. I'm really proud of a project that we're getting ready to roll out, and it's called the Graham Act. It's a piece of legislation that was really designed to model one of my district's responses, named after a former police chief who tragically passed away, but he created a pilot program within the Ocala community to address addiction issues in the community. And it was a novel approach. And as I've been talking with experts in Washington and colleagues, they had never heard of anything like this. And it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or black or white, or educated, or you dropped out of high school. It doesn't matter. Everyone knows somebody who has been impacted by the fentanyl poisoning, by the opioid epidemic. We know that. And so we basically took this model and said, you know what, we can actually take all the billions, $75 billion that has gone towards opioid epidemic research, right? It's like, we get it. It's a problem. At some point we have to start addressing it. We can redirect those funds, not all of them, because I think we need to cut quite a bit, largely out of government spending as a whole, but we can redirect that in a more meaningful way, do a pilot program that actually reduces the footprint of government. We should empower communities. And this is going to be an option where people can say, okay, we're going to take this pilot program, implement it in our community. And it's not a big government answer. It's a small government solution. And I love that. And when I talked to some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they said, that's a really good idea. I like that. And some of them have been personally affected by this issue. And so that's one that I think you're going to see a lot of Republicans and Democrats coming together to work on. I know there's going to be fights over the big issues, spending, Ukraine aid, things like that. We're going to have those fights, but there are certainly issues that will cut across. And I think that dealing with the epidemic the opioid epidemic is going to be one. I think some of the defense issues that are coming up next year, some of the farm bill issues that'll cut across both sides of the aisle. Those are all areas where we have an opportunity to do good work without having to compromise who we are as both conservatives and liberals.
Right. Well, I think for many Americans, we're heading into holiday season, and you're trying to think about buying Christmas gifts and all those sorts of things, right? And this has been a year when your paycheck has slowly, seemed smaller and smaller and smaller every month as cost of living has gone up, as inflation has taken its toll. How do we solve that? What's the first thing that you think Congress needs to try to do to try to get that back in line and to be able to provide some relief for Americans who are really struggling with that economic anxiety that we're all, I think, experiencing?
I mean, obviously, the very basis of our economy is energy. Everything that we do starts with having energy to propel manufacturing, logistics, transportation, you name it. Without a domestic supply that is reliable, that is a problem. If we're dependent on our adversaries, let's just be honest, across the globe for our very basic fuel supply, we're not going to be in a good place from a national security standpoint or an economic one. So I think restarting the domestic production, expanding domestic production of our energy, there's 200 years worth of natural gas in Pennsylvania alone. We should be expanding the above all energy approach in this country. I'm sorry, wind and solar is not going to fuel America. It's going to be a part of it, but it's not going to be the answer to all of it. So I think right away, if we can address some of the hurdles that we're having with the energy portfolio of this nation, that's gonna start a good reboot in bringing down the cost of everything. Because whether it's your food, whether it's your clothing, whether it's your supplies, your whatever, your basic goods, everything is driven largely by the price of your inputs, which largely is fuel. So that's going to be one way we can bring it down. You hit on the fact that, we're heading into holiday season and people are paying more across the board. Well, yeah, this is what happens when you spend $10 trillion on BS programs. Let's just be honest. So we have to stop the spending. You got to stop the bleeding. We've got to put the tourniquet on. We've got to latch it down, and we have to stop the bleeding. Throwing money at a problem does not make it go away. That needs to be screamed by every member at the top of their lungs in every part of Washington, D.C. We have to get out of the mindset that throwing money at a problem is going to fix it. It doesn't. Sometimes it's a simple policy change. Sometimes you just got to get rid of certain departments. Yeah. I think that is going to help tremendously. When you have an inflation at over, I think, 8.3 now, nationally, You have people that are spending $8,400 to $8,500 more annually just in basic goods and services than they were the year before. Well, that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for, a very Merry Christmas. So I think people are going to be hurting. People are going to pare down, the Christmas spending, the holiday stuff. But I think the biggest gift that we can give folks back home is being better stewards of their money. It's not monopoly money. This is our money. And I think that a good reminder is going to take place when the gavel switches hands in January, on January 3rd, that this is the people's money and we're here to do the people's work, not craft big congressional careers and, have these big fancy, jobs and offices. I don't think I think there's a culture shift happening here, and I'm excited for that.
So I'm going to wrap up. Since we were just talking about the holiday season, I'm going to wrap up with perhaps the most important question. It's a two-part question. When do you start listening to Christmas music? First part of the question. The second part of the question is, what is your go-to Thanksgiving pie?
Oh, okay. I will admit, and you could ask my team, you can ask people who know me, I am what you would call extra. So we don't do just one Christmas tree. We do a Christmas tree in every room in my house. But as far as the Christmas music, Mariah Carey does not start until December 1st. Because Thanksgiving is very important. That's my husband's favorite holiday. And so I go all out on the extra for the food. Like I'm a baker. I'm not a chef. My husband's the chef in the family, but I bake. So I will bake up some crazy stuff. But Mariah Carey, she don't start until December 1st.
That is the correct answer to that question, by the way.
Yes.
So you've passed. Yeah.
Yes. And then my favorite pie. Okay, this might not be I'm probably gonna get hate mail for this, but I don't actually like pie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I will tell you my desserts of choice. I like to make a dump cake, peach cobbler, apple cobbler in the crock pot. That's always really good and makes the house smell great. But my favorite dessert, I think, has to be, and this is gonna be terrible, we call it crack salad. It is homemade whipped cream with pretzels that have been baked in butter and brown sugar and pineapple. And you mix it all together and it is just amazing.
See, what we're going to have to do now is we'll have to do another version of this where you just make that for us and we do like a whole, cooking show episode. I think that's coming next. So, well, I greatly appreciate your time with us today, and good luck as you move into the next session. And
thank you.
Certainly would encourage our grassroots to stay connected here and let us know how we can help and make sure that that people's voices are being heard when they need to be heard. So awesome. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Take care.